I'm a pretty reasonable left-leaning Labour voter, and I want to know, Angela, do you think that you guys are relying on my hatred of the Tories at the moment over my concern of Keir's flirtation with the right? And I'm genuinely interested in your answer because I don't feel like you're fully representing me at the moment.
What areas, Ashley, in particular?
Well, this idea of the protests, I'm a pretty liberal guy, and nothing from Labour saying that they're going to reverse Sir Braverman's protest policy. There's a number of things. I can go into a lot that Labour are sitting on the fence to try and buy back the red wall voters, but what about me?
Well, Ashley,
thanks for
that question. And no, we're not taking your vote for granted or your, despising of the Tories, because actually there's quite a lot of people, even people that voted Tory at the moment, that are, shall we say, less than impressed with the Conservatives at the moment. And we're not relying on anyone to then just use that to say, well, we'll vote Labour. I think we've got a very inspirational plan. If you take my Future of Work, which will reform the work sector so that people have got secure jobs, we'd end fire and rehire, we'd give people rights from day one, we'd expand flexible working, we'd promote collective bargaining, we'd support the unions as opposed to being in constant dispute with them, who do raise standards in the workplace. That's one area in particular I think will transform the work in Britain. And then you look at the Great British Energy and you look at the Green Prosperity Plan, which is about getting to net zero, which is what we know we need to do, but by doing it by skilling up people, giving young people skills for the future and a long-term job that is secure. Those two things in itself, I think, will make an incredible difference. The house building programme, so people can get a home for the first time. These things, the investment in our NHS at the moment, which we've seen has been completely run down by the Conservatives in the last 13 years. 10,000 new doctors and nurses places that will have an incredible impact on our NHS and bringing down waiting times. I mean, all of those things in itself, I think, are magnificent. But is it going to be everything to all people? No, it has to be pragmatic as well. We have to be clear about what we inherit, and we're going to inherit, if we're lucky enough to get elected, a very difficult economic situation. So we can't do everything we want to do immediately, but I can promise you we will change Britain for the better.
What about specifically the public order bill that Ashley referred to?
Yeah, and public order, look, the right to protest is an absolute key pillar stone of our democracy.
It's been demolished.
Yeah, and like with quite a lot of things, including voter ID and everything else, the ability
position is not to rescind that bill.
Well, our party position is very clear that the right to protest is absolutely part of our pillar stone of democracy. It's not something that we've been fascinated on like the Conservatives are. We don't believe that there is a huge problem with people protesting, but we are concerned about the way in which the whole culture of this government is about restricting people's civil rights. And I think actually some of the Conservatives are concerned about that as well.
They are, but again, you're ducking it a bit. The threshold to define disruptive protesting gets to be essentially decided by a politician. Sir Braverman can point at someone over there waving a flag and say that is disruptive, or a police officer. And we've seen many reasons in recent months not to trust police officers as much as we were taught to when we were growing up.
Sure, but that's a whole other issue on how we put that conduct
because
of police back in the
my colleague
right
Charlotte
place,
Lynch was arrested by police using their own discretion at a protest, and she was there to do journalism. So it would be quite straightforward to say it's ridiculous that this threshold has been lowered so much that it's in the eye of a Home Secretary.
And it's a cultural issue that comes from the top.
So why aren't you going to get rid of it?
And the cultural issue of this government is very draconian and is about
so
taking people's rights away. Well, our culture in the Labour Party government will be somewhat different to that. People should be able to go about their daily business, but also people should also have the right to protest in this country,
so
as they always have.
Why aren't you going to get rid of it?
Because it's not a question of whether we'll get rid of it or not. The culture will change. And also, in terms of our priorities, the first King's Bill will have the stuff on the future of work. It will make sure that, we have rights for people and that we support people in getting through the cost of living crisis. There's a lot of things to do immediately, but the one thing that we won't be doing is acting like Sir Braverman and their government, who have been taking civil rights away and pushing a culture of restricting people and demonising people for exercising our hard-fought rights.
It's like a weapon, Angela, and it's all very well. I think what you're saying is, don't worry, because we won't use that weapon. But the weapon will still be there. And if you do get into power, then a day will dawn when you're no longer in power and someone else will come in.
And we will
you
look
have
at,
the power to legislate to remove that weapon.
And we will look at that. But I'm saying that our priority in the next coming Labour government has to be about tackling the cost of living crisis and about giving people proper standards in work and reversing the attacks on our NHS and our public services that we've seen from the Conservatives. And our culture around people's rights and civil liberties is completely different to Suella Braverman.
Last week, Tobias Ellwood, a Tory MP, came out and admitted that Brexit is a mistake. I'm not hearing anything from the Labour Party that reflects that same position. Why not?
Because leaving the European Union was a decision that was made some years ago in a referendum and, remain lost. And that's the facts. And we've left the European Union. I think the way in which we've done it is a dog's dinner, if I'm honest. And I think the debate is how we keep closer relationship with Europe and how we move forward. But you can't put the genie back in the bottle. We had a referendum. The country voted to leave the European Union. And this government, the Conservatives, have handled it, I think, disastrously. We were promised oven-ready deals. We were promised lots of money. Jacob Rees-Mogg said our energy bills would go down. That hasn't happened. So I think, people are angry that, what they were promised hasn't been delivered. But we had a referendum and the referendum was to leave. And that's where we are. And we've been very pragmatic in our approach since then in saying that we've left the European Union, but that doesn't mean to say that we can't look at how we can get better trading relationships and better collaboration.
It kind of does mean that. And everything's in their
gift anyway. Well, you can't have
it
back in.
No, I agree.
That's the point I'm making. We're out.
It's a generational, if there is going to be any
out.
reverse.
I mean, if we tried to even get back in, you wouldn't be in on the same terms as we were in before. We're out of the European Union.
You won't answer this question to Steph's satisfaction, and everybody understands why. But is there a point at which it becomes politically live again? Because the polling, imagine it hit 80% saying it was all a terrible mistake. You've got Farage admitting it was a failure.
Yeah, OK, let's walk through that. OK, so everyone says it's a terrible mistake. We shouldn't have done it. You can't go, hi, can I come back in where I was?
No, I know.
That's not an option.
I know
it's
that.
not an option.
But the conversation about returning,
you either try and rejoin, and then you rejoin on different terms, which I don't believe people will be happy with, or you try and make good of a situation that the government have completely handled disastrously.